In 1978, four men released four solo albums on the same day, and all four went platinum before a single fan had bought one. That's not a rhetorical exaggeration. Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss, the four members of Kiss, each put out a solo record simultaneously as a marketing stunt, and Casablanca Records shipped roughly 1 million copies of each to stores. The certification arrived on the strength of that shipment. None of the four albums cracked the top 20 of the Billboard chart. Stores, sitting on shelves full of unsold Kiss solo records, sent the excess back to the label by the truckload. The plaque stayed on the wall. This is called, in the industry, a sell-in strategy, and I want to be precise about what makes it remarkable, because the remarkable part isn't that it happened. It's that it was completely, unambiguously legal. The organization awarding platinum status had written its own rule to measure shipments, not sales. Casablanca understood the rule better than the public did, and used it exactly as written. That same year, the soundtrack to the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band film shipped platinum and then generated 2 million returns. It was, by any definition anyone in the room would have used in conversation, a flop. It carries a platinum certificate to this day, 67 years of gold and platinum records, and the number on the plaque has never once, in a single instance, meant this many people bought this. Understand that, and everything else in this video is just detail, quick housekeeping, because the structure matters more than usual here. The Recording Industry Association of America is a trade organization. Its members are record labels, historically the major ones, though the roster has broadened over time. It exists to represent those labels' commercial and legal interests. It lobbies on copyright law, it pursues piracy cases, and, since 1958, it runs the Gold and Platinum Awards program. So the entity certifying how successful a record is funded by, and exists to serve, the people who made the record. To be fair to the RIAA, and this video is going to be fair to it, because the actual story is more interesting than a simple accusation of fraud. The certification isn't self-reported. A label has to request it and pay a fee. An independent accounting firm conducts the audit. The underlying data is usually the artist's own royalty statement, cross-checked against distribution records. But notice what's being audited. Not sales, shipments. The instruction the auditor is given is, verify that this many units left the warehouse for retail, mail order, record clubs, TV marketing, and other outlets. Whether those units subsequently sold, sat in a stockroom, or came back 3 months later as a return is, by design, outside the scope of the audit. This is not a secret. It has never been a secret. It is written, in plain English, on the RIAA's own website, in the description of how the program works. The gap between what people assume a gold record means and what it has always actually meant has been sitting in public view for 67 years, and almost nobody has ever scrolled down far enough to read it. The mechanism for gaming a shipment-based system is so simple it barely needs a chapter, but the detail is where the absurdity lives. Free goods. From early in the program's history, copies given away, to retailers as promotional stock, to radio stations, to distributors as incentive, could be counted toward certification alongside copies that were sold. A sale and a promotional giveaway were, for the purposes of the plaque, the same unit. Add that rule to the shipment, not sale rule, and you get a genuinely strange possible universe. A record that was never purchased by a single member of the public at any price anywhere and is nonetheless certified platinum because it was manufactured, shipped, and partly given away in quantities that clear the threshold. Nobody claims this exact scenario happened at full scale, but the 1978 Kiss and Sgt. Pepper's cases sit close enough to it that the industry itself treated them as a wake-up call. The response in 1979 was the RIAA's first real patch, a rule requiring recordings to wait 120 days after release before they could be submitted for certification, specifically to stop labels claiming platinum status off a single opening shipment before the market had any chance to send records back. That's worth sitting with as a pattern, because it's the pattern this whole series keeps finding. The fix wasn't start measuring sales. The fix was wait a bit before measuring shipments, which slows the exploit down without touching its foundation. Before going further, it's worth knowing how arbitrary the threshold numbers have always been because that makes everything downstream easier to read correctly. The program began on the 14th of March, 1958. The first gold single went to Perry Como. The first gold album, a few months later, went to the Oklahoma soundtrack. The original bar for a gold single was 1 million units sold, genuinely sold, at that point, since the free goods and pure shipment logic hadn't yet swallowed the program. Gold albums, because so few LPs sold in the millions in 1958, were measured differently, not by units at all, but by $1 million in wholesale revenue. In 1975, a unit threshold was added to the album award, 500,000 copies, alongside the dollar figure. Platinum arrived in 1976, for albums selling 1 million and singles selling 2 million. In 1989, as single sales were declining industry-wide, the RIAA quietly lowered the singles bar 500,000 for gold, 1 million for platinum, a threshold that has not moved since. Diamond for 10 million units arrived in 1999. None of these numbers are physical constants. They are policy decisions, reset periodically to keep the program feeling meaningful as the market underneath it changes, which is exactly what meaningful requires you to do when the thing you're measuring is moving. But it's worth naming plainly because the RIAA's own promotional language treats each certification as timeless. And a platinum single from 1985 and one from 2019 do not represent remotely the same quantity of anything. Here's the detail that makes this video genuinely distinct from the last one, and it surprises most people. Nielsen SoundScan, the barcode scanning system that revolutionized the Billboard charts in 1991, the entire subject of the previous video, has never been used for RIAA certification. Not used to be, then stopped. Never used at all for this specific purpose. The RIAA certification system predates SoundScan by more than 3 decades, and the RIAA elected to keep running its own separate accounting method rather than switch to the more rigorous one sitting right next door. The RIAA's own defenders have a real non-cynical argument for this, and it deserves to be stated properly. SoundScan only captures scans at participating retail barcode terminals. It has historically missed a meaningful slice of the market. Club sales, some mail-order channels, non-traditional, and small independent outlets. The RIAA's shipment-based method, whatever else is wrong with it, does at least attempt to capture the entire distribution chain, including the parts SoundScan's barcode scanners never see. That's a genuine trade-off, not a smokescreen. But look at what it means in practice. The music industry has, sitting side by side since 1991, 2 different systems for describing commercial success. One counts actual point-of-sale transactions and misses some real sales. The other counts the entire distribution chain and, by its own written rules, cannot distinguish a sale from a warehouse return. The industry kept both and let the public assume they were describing the same kind of fact. For 55 years, whatever the flaws in shipment, the unit being counted was at least a physical or digital thing. A record, a tape, a CD, a download. Somebody had acquired an object. That stopped being true on the 9th of May, 2013. The RIAA announced that on-demand streams would now count toward digital single certification at a rate of 100 streams equaling 1 download sale. Notice the category creep already happening in that sentence. A stream is not a purchase. A person streaming a song for free has acquired nothing, spent nothing, and made no binding decision about the song at all. They might have clicked it by accident, left it playing in the background, or heard it once and never again. The RIAA's formula declared by fiat that 100 of those events equals 1 person handing over money for a permanent copy. 2 years and 9 months later, on the 1st of February 2016, the RIAA extended streaming into the far bigger prize. Full album certification. The new formula was precise and worth hearing in full because the specificity is the joke. 1,500 on-demand audio or video streams equals 10 track sales equals 1 album sale. the digital single ratio was simultaneously loosened again, from 100 streams per sale to 150. The RIAA's chief executive at the time, Kerry Sherman, framed the change as simply keeping pace with reality. Listening was exploding, he said, and the certification program hadn't caught up. That's true. And it's also exactly the sentence you'd expect from an organization about to make its own awards dramatically easier to win. The number itself, 150 streams equals one sale, deserves scrutiny because it looks scientific and isn't. The RIAA's own language, when it announced the formula, was explicit that the ratio was based on what it called comparative consumption patterns, not on marketplace value. Worth translating, they were not asking how much money does a stream generate compared to a sale, which would tie the certification to something economically real. They were asking, how does the volume of streaming compare to the volume of buying, which is a completely different and much softer question, one with no single correct answer, decided by an organization with a direct financial interest in the answer landing somewhere generous. Run the numbers the other way, using actual revenue. At Spotify's own reported per-stream rates from the period, well under a cent per play, 150 streams generated the platform something in the low single-digit dollars. An actual album purchase, at the time, retailed for around $12. On a pure cash basis, the ratio should arguably have been many multiples higher than 150 to 1 for it to represent equivalent revenue. The RIAA didn't do that math, or if it did, it didn't use it. It chose a volume-based ratio instead, the one that made certification achievable faster. And once you understand that the ratio itself was a judgment call, not a physical constant, the diamond wall coming down makes complete sense. For its first 15 years, diamond certification, 10 million units, was reserved for genuine cultural monoliths. Elton John's Princess Diana tribute single hit it in 1997, 17 days after release, on the strength of 10 million physical copies sold, an entirely pre-streaming, entirely real, genuinely enormous number, and it stood alone at that level for over 15 years. Once the streaming formula existed, the 10 million threshold stopped requiring 10 million people to do anything. It required 10 million equivalent units, and a fraction of those units could now be manufactured by a song looping in the background of someone's phone. Lil Nas X's Old Town Road reached diamond status in October 2019, 200 days after release, the fastest any song had ever done it. At the time, only the 32nd song in the entire 61-year history of the program to reach that level at all. I want to be very careful with the framing here, because this is not a story about a bad or undeserving song. Old Town Road was a genuine phenomenon. 19 weeks at number 1, the longest run in Hot 100 history. A real and remarkable moment. Culturally, nobody is arguing it didn't happen. The point is narrower and stranger than that. The 1997 Elton John Diamond record required 10 million individual purchase decisions. The 2019 Lil Nas X Diamond record required some purchases and an enormous quantity of streams, valued at a ratio the RIAA itself describes as based on volume patterns rather than economic value. Both records say diamond on them. Both plaques look identical. They are not measuring commensurable things, and the certificate does not tell you that. This is the point where Video 2 and Video 3 become the same river, so let's name it directly. RIAA's certification has always used its own separate formula, rather than Billboard's. Recall from the last video that Billboard's own streaming ratio has shifted multiple times, most recently narrowing to a 1 to 2.5 split between paid and ad-supported plays, and that YouTube walked away from Billboard's charts entirely over that exact number in December 2025. The RIAA has not made the equivalent move. As of this recording, its formula still runs on the 2016 ratio, 150 streams to a single 1,500 to an album unit. Regardless of whether those streams came from a paying subscriber or a free listener with ads playing between songs, Billboard treats those two listeners as worth wildly different amounts. The RIAA, for certification purposes, still treats them as identical, which means the two central institutions of the American music business, the chart that ranks a record's current popularity, and the plaque that certifies its all-time success, are, right now, quietly running on two different formulas for the exact same underlying behavior. A stream is worth one thing walking into the Hot 100 and a different thing walking into a gold record audit. Nobody voted on this. Nobody announced a reconciliation. Both organizations simply built the formula that suited their own program. And the fact that the two numbers disagree with each other is not treated by either of them as a problem requiring a solution, because neither institution's formula was ever required to agree with objective reality in the first place. It was only ever required to agree with itself. One more thing needs saying briefly, because you'll be tempted to think the RIAA at least dodged the streaming bot problem covered in the previous video by being a step removed from Billboard. It didn't. Every stream counted toward a gold or platinum award is, definitionally, the same stream that can be manufactured by the bot farms and click farms described in the last chapter of the chart's video. A fraudulent stream that inflates a Billboard position inflates an RIAA certification claim by exactly the same action at exactly the same moment, submitted through the same reporting chain. The RIAA's certification criteria do require submitters to validate that streams have actually been distributed or downloaded within the United States. Language aimed specifically at excluding manufactured or foreign-sourced plays, but the burden of that validation sits, as it always has, with the label requesting its own certification and the accountant it's paying to check the label's own numbers. The fox is still, at minimum, choosing which henhouse gets audited. Here is the sentence I want you to leave with, because it's the one that actually explains all 67 years of this at once. A gold record was never a measurement of the public. It was always a measurement of the industry's own internal accounting, dressed up, deliberately and skillfully, over decades, to look like public verdict. In 1958, that meant counting dollars at wholesale, before most albums existed as a mass product at all. In 1978, it meant counting a truckload of Kiss solo records on their way to the shelf, indifferent to whether they'd come straight back. In 2016, it meant deciding, by internal formula rather than economic reality, that 150 free background plays equal a single deliberate purchase. Today, it means running that same formula in open disagreement with the very chart sitting one desk over, because reconciling the two was never actually the job. None of this required a conspiracy. It required exactly one structural fact, present since March 1958 and unchanged since. The people measuring the industry's success are paid by the industry, and every formula they've ever written has quietly, reasonably, and legally served the side holding the pen. The plaque on the wall is real. The screws are real. The little gold record inside the frame is a genuine object. What it certifies has never, for one single year of its existence, been the thing you assumed when you looked at it.